What's going on, boys? Today we are talking more order development. We'll start with a Terry A. Davis saying, I have found useful. If your life is empty, then God will fill it. And with that, a thought on order development, putting it, what we're doing here, more into perspective. If you try to do anything with all the specifics lined up, then it will inevitably fall apart. If you want something to happen, at least by my method, you fuck around with something specific in mind, but nothing specific lined up, and then, eventually, whatever it is or the path to your goal will materialize. With order development, we are screwing around, but we are creating an environment from which a system or an order can rise. With that, let's talk a little bit about the boy, the homie, the grand bro, Shadowheart, and her religion, at least the one she starts with. Learning about Shar worship was so interesting to me because I can see exactly why it appeals to people and the sort of people it appeals to. I think some people are born to be unhappy, and I think that's one of the reasons this self-improvement bloomer shit is nonsense. At least nonsense when you look at it as a road everyone needs to be on, or a road everyone can be on. And that's probably one of the reasons many of these self-improvement quotes bloomer type people tend to be such aggressive losers. The idea of anyone not subscribing to the system that's keeping their scraps of ego somewhat above water, or trying to contend with what they are instead of pretending to be something they aren't, is threatening to them. That's why when you are grappling with the negativity you're born with, 10 people will show up and call you a loser and tell you that washing your penis and collecting stamps will make you happy. These are the people, not the ones who are that self-improvement bloomer thing and are that, and you can tell the difference because they don't feel threatened by other people's modes of being. These are the people who are denying themselves. The people who haven't accepted they are born to suffer. They are born to be punished. They are born not to be happy. But if you are someone who is born this way, then I think a difficult but important step in your growth or on your road to becoming whatever you're supposed to become is accepting what you are. Accepting that you were chosen to carry a burden. Chosen to be hurt. Chosen to have bad luck. Chosen to feel worthless. Chosen to feel nauseous all the time. Repressing your negative feelings hurts you. They are there. Trying to defeat your negative feelings hurts you. You can't beat them. They aren't going away. Trying to escape your negative feelings, moving to a new place, changing something, hurts you. You can't run fast enough or far enough. You're carrying them. They're inside you. They constitute yourself. When you accept what you are, and that's hard, it's not an on or off switch, and it's not something that you can maintain all the time, but once you decide you're going to acknowledge yourself, accept what you are. You gain a more focused agency. Trying to overcome your negative feelings is like trying to cut off your feet because walking on gravel barefoot hurts. Once you accept that you have feet, you are not going to cut them off, and yes, gravel does hurt, you can start walking. It is never going to be fun. You're never going to develop enough calluses. It's always going to hurt. But once you accept it, you've seized control of your ability to do shit again. At least as long as you can keep it up. And if you can't keep it up all the time, that's fine. Realizing that you can is what matters. Now, this ties into Shar worship, because Shar worshippers tend to be people who are hurting a lot and constantly and can't stop hurting. And by accepting Shar into your soul, those pains, your pain, is alleviated by oblivion. And initially I kinda got it, even though I didn't agree with it. I think there's something to be said of recognizing that by your being chosen to hurt, there is something you've been chosen to learn or at least witness in it. Another interesting point, I've been listening to / reading stories about people who have flatlined and come back. An interesting pattern is people who die by accidents or when it might have been their time experience death as this positive, loving, focused feeling. Whereas people who maybe die when it's not their time experience it like a nightmare. And that isn't to say everyone who dies when it isn't their time isn't dying at their time. It's that when you try to die and it certainly isn't your time, and I think you know the difference, you're doing something wrong. No matter how you go when it's your time. And trying to go when it isn't your time is the ultimate denial of purpose. So when you scratch your temple with iron and it is your time, maybe that's peaceful. But when you do it and it's not your time, probably not. Now, if escaping pain via nothingness were all Shar worship then there would be an argument for it, in my opinion. However, that's not all it is. By accepting Shar, your pain is taken away, but you are expected to forfeit all of your positive emotions, which is nonsense because positivity, when it's righteous, is equally purposeful as negativity is. But then, even further, on top of that, you're expected to hand over your agency to Shar, which to me doesn't sound like release. It sounds like someone who is taking advantage of people who are hurting so badly, they would rather hand over everything just to make that pain go away instead of dying before their time. It's that forfeiture of agency that bothers me so much. This monster takes people who are hurting and says, I'll take your pain away if you give me everything you have and could ever have. Your agency, your right, your ability to investigate, to introspect, to contemplate, and to choose is important. That's your soul. That's everything. Yourself is your purpose and your tools. And I was thinking, if we are trying to build a religion, or at least an order, and we've decided on a decentralized model, then do we need preachers or temple masters? Someone who stands in front of a congregation and tells people what they're supposed to think? No, absolutely not. At least not built into the foundations. Not pushing a Shar-like doctrine of do this, give me. It's a confusing spot because while I am doing what I'm doing, I don't think what I'm doing is necessary for an order like this one to function. The entire point of ultimately decentralized worship is so people develop their own connection with the divine. But I also thought of another reason behind it. Again, things materializing as they should. Coincidence. God used to be a check on a king's power. That got fucky-wucky when religion got a little too organized, a little too material, a little too mortal, and could be bought and sold, and used to control people. That is not at all, to my eyes, what religion is supposed to be. God is supposed to be something other, something outside, something intangible, untouchable. And if you are trying to organize an order in a centralized manner, a doctrinal manner, then you're setting yourself up for corruption. The idea of this order is not to push the worship of any one god or the following of any one practice. The idea is to help people facilitate connections with their deity, personal connections, connections that can't be corrupted and therefore can't be controlled by traditional power structures, the slime pits of corruption. It serves a spiritual purpose in helping people along their path, and it serves a material purpose in checking organizational power or centralized power in a way they can't shut down. A man with God and anime on his side is dangerous, as he should be. But, knowing all that, what is the order even? Well, I think at its foundations, the order is an emphasis on finding what you need within yourself. Even if that's not religious or you don't look at it in a divine way. You have everything you need inside you already. All anyone needs is the assurance they aren't wrong for looking inside themselves for a way of thinking or a way of being that does not look like anything a central authority or centralized culture tells them they should be being or thinking, and support and resources in their delving. And neither of those are even required. You can do this without assurance, without support, without resources, but an order that's there to back someone up in their soul searching can be helpful. I think there is something worth it there. Or another way of thinking about it, a nice little inn, non-denominational inn, sitting at or just inside the mouth of the void, helping along anyone who's in it or anyone who wants to be in it. I heard something in a video recently. The closer a person comes to truth, or to whatever they're trying to find, the more painful and alienating their life becomes. Wouldn't it be comforting to know there are people out there who get it and want to help you find not what they want you to find, but what you want to find? Or if you've felt the call but haven't done anything like this before, then people who can help you start your path without aiming you at their shit. And again, not even people necessarily. A set of beliefs or writings, materials, an order without people that acts as a spiritual boot drive. That's what I think the order is at its base. But that got me thinking, what would one of our theoretical temples look like? Because you can make organization and structure available without making it necessary. Well, it would be quiet. There would be spaces people could hole up in by themselves and be shielded from outside horror waves for a little while and get some thinking, reflection, studying, whatever done, with the option of having your devices locked up should you choose, so you can go in with no distractions if you'd like that. There would be a nice library or archive of other media for study, a nice reading area, sitting area, a secure spot for the use of selected substances, maybe a spot people can sit and talk, do the old Patrice one-on-one, among other people, but far enough away it won't intrude on people who are trying to figure shit out solo. And then one other key feature that would require an employee or an attendant or an acolyte. I had a weird dream the other night. I was outside an abandoned movie theater and I met this country dude, but in the new country sense, you know, with the long hair and the ball cap and the skinny and the acne. If you grew up in the South, you know exactly the sort of person I'm talking about. So this dude and I sit down outside this abandoned movie theater in the middle of the night, and he starts telling me all the bad decisions he's made leading up to this moment right now, in which he's trying to get inside this abandoned movie theater for something he hasn't figured out yet. And he starts crying. And he starts crying on me, but then there is this distinct moment. It goes from this dude is crying on me and I'm like hugging him, to the point he's crying and I'm holding him. And although physically those two phases weren't that different, there was a tremendous emotional difference between the phases. And that made me think about confession in Catholicism. And Catholicism is weird because there is a ton I like about that system. It's just everything else about it, aside from these mechanisms or methods, are a horror show. But for the most part, I like confession. Airing, voicing all your sins for another human being to hear and then being forgiven. If it weren't for everything around confession, that would be the perfect or a perfect tool. Meaning, we're going to snatch it and make a few small mechanical and textural changes. So, our version of confession would be less about airing all the things you've done wrong and being forgiven, even though I do like that. Boy, howdy, do I love original sin. I need to be punished. And more about radical, recognized acceptance. Meaning, you go on whatever a tangent, or as long a tangent as you need to get into that hating yourself or hurting space. That space, that those recesses of your soul you try not even to get into on your own in your mind with nobody around, and try to put them into words if you can, or try to find the words if you can't, and do it with someone there with you. The idea being not only to open that pressure valve and let it all out, but also to recognize, despite your voicing these Tartarus parts of yourself, you got them out and the world hasn't exploded and you weren't lynched. Or, in other words, in a cultural vacuum, just your existing by yourself, you are not wrong for feeling these things or being these things. It's culture that tries to tell you that you're evil or should be killed for thinking or feeling or being what you are. Without culture, which is bastard magic produced by bastards, you're fine. Divine, even. You feel these ways or are these things for a reason. And what to do after accepting yourself is another decision of yours. And you might think this is something you should sort of be able to complete in therapy. And with a good therapist, I mean, there are a ton of awful therapists. I lucked out and had or found finally a good therapist. But even with good therapy, what happens when your healthcare stops covering it, like mine did? Or you no longer have healthcare, like I don't? Go to therapy, bitches. Make me want to scream and shout. This is different because there is no fear of saying too much. You'll notice there are tons of memes about little too honest, or I was a little too honest with the therapist. There are not as many memes about I was a little too honest with the priest. Though there are there are other memes, which is why we don't want to do that. And it would be free, of course, because we're bringing in $15,000 per month on Patreon, meaning we can afford, as a nonprofit, to provide all our services for free to serve our public. And then who would administer these voicing sessions? Well, I actually think FE inferiors would be good for this. So INFJs feel like absences, really empty, because they could be anything. And frankly, given enough emotional or moralistic pressure, they're inclined to be anything at the drop of a hat. Whereas FE inferiors, in terms of that emotional texture, also seem to be missing something, but that absence, that or our absence, doesn't feel as intense because we also aren't going to be anything. In fact, Michael Pierce talks about his ISTP friend who performs this function for her friends by using this solid absence. The only issue is I've found FE inferiors are actually very expressive when you hit them with something they have an opinion on. They might not say anything about it, and it might not really matter to them, but they will make a face. Therefore, masks. Specifically, ballistic masks with hoods, because aesthetics are important. The idea is to create a space in which a person voicing themselves can be recognized without feeling in any way judged or pressured. By removing expressions or the administer's expressions from the picture, that makes that a bit easier, I think. And then again, those masks specifically just for the aesthetics, just for the mystique. Because, as Alan Watts said, the packaging of a gift or the wrapping is just as important as the gift itself. And we want our wrapping to be fun. And then on top of that, having resources would probably be useful. Someone who has performed this function long enough to know which sorts of people want for their journey, and is experienced or well read enough to have things on hand, resources on hand, to provide them and help them along. So, in summary, decentralized guidance not toward one end, but on how to find your end, with or without people. On one hand, to connect with your deity or spiritual purpose, if you have one, and on the other hand, to check power in a way that can't be corrupted as easily as centralized worship can be. But that about rippity wraps this one up. I hope you enjoyed watching, because I certainly enjoyed making it. There were a few other points I wanted to go deeper in on, but we'll get into those another time, maybe. Like if you enjoyed, because it helps me out a lot. Subscribe if you haven't, because we do this shit sometimes. And comment your thoughts, because I love hearing from you. What are some practices or services you can think of that facilitate reflection and soul searching without pushing specific doctrine? Let me know. Thanks again for watching, everybody. Really be a lot of fun on this channel. So much fun. In fact, you cannot preach fun from the altar. You can instead practice fun independently in your soul by yourself. Maybe among other people, but alone together. Because that's the best way to have fun. And that's all I'm showing you on this channel, and I look forward to doing this with you guys again in the future.